So, developing your retargeting strategy. There are two main criteria to bear in mind when you're building your strategy, and both are focused on your customer, because after all, they're the people who you're trying to get to convert. The first is focusing on who your customer actually is, and the second is where they're at in the purchase funnel. So, number one, let's first analyze who your customer is. Because one of the biggest mistakes made in digital marketing by companies, even large ones, is to focus too much on their own business and their own offering and what makes them so great without focusing on the customer. And this isn't a mistake which we want to make with relation to retargeting. So you want to understand who your customer is in order to reach them in the correct way and on the right platform. So for example, if your customer is young and image conscious, you'd want to appeal to your audience on a more visual platform, which appeals to a younger demographic. So something like Instagram. But if your customer is a business-related customer, you may want to use something like Twitter or LinkedIn in order to reach your customer. And this is because it's the most appropriate platform for the type of business which you are and the type of customer which they're at. And therefore, it's going to be the most effective. You may also have different products which appeal to different audiences, or indeed different audiences for the same product. But you should still think about a couple of different things when considering who your customer is with relation to retargeting. So number one is which platforms are best to reach them on. And number two is what messaging, so that's the language and the creative, should you use. So the second customer strategy we're going to look at is where the user is in the purchase funnel. So most of you will probably be familiar with the purchase funnel. However, moving through this funnel takes longer depending on the price or the complexity of the good or service that you're offering. And this is because the higher the price or the more complex a product, the more time people will spend researching and vitally considering a purchase. So if you have a higher cost or more complex product, then you may have to build a slightly more sophisticated remarketing strategy than if it's for a real kind of simple transactional product. So you're going to need to employ different tactics depending on where the user is at in the buying cycle. So let me work through two examples just to kind of clearly illustrate this. So first off, a nice kind of simple, relatively cheap product like a t-shirt. So the customer doesn't really need to know that much more about the t-shirt. You can retarget here based on kind of simple offer-based advertising to move people through the funnel from awareness to conversion pretty quickly. However, if we consider kind of marketing automation software, which is a much more complex, expensive kind of B2B product, it therefore takes much more time and effort to move people through the funnel because the user needs much more convincing. They're going to spend much more time in the consideration phase. So they need much more convincing as to why they should purchase this marketing automation software. And this is where you need to develop a slightly more extensive retargeting strategy. So let me talk you through developing this more complex retargeting strategy, and you can then simplify it based on the simplicity and the price point of your product and service. So if your customer is only at the awareness stage, so at the very top of the funnel, they're very early in their journey with you, and say they just sort of visited your website but left after a very short amount of time. So after maybe doing a little bit of research without showing any real purchasing intent, so they haven't looked at kind of the pricing pages and things, then they might be interested in what you have to offer. And this means obviously that they're aware of your business because indeed they've been to your website, but they're probably going to need further education as to why they should buy your product or service. So for this type of customer, you might want to show them content highlighting your USPs and your differentiators from your competition. For the consideration phase, so if a customer visits your website and spends a fair bit of time viewing your product and viewing some of your pricing pages, then that's a relatively strong signal that you're part of the set of businesses which they're considering purchasing from. With these customers, it's about reinforcing your USPs and introducing pricing language into your advertising to drive them towards converting. So for that conversion phase then, so for customers who've maybe added a product to their basket, that's a real kind of strong intent, then it's all about driving them towards that conversion, sort of getting them over the line. So this is where you have left item in baskets notifications, or indeed conversion-focused adverts. So the final piece then for retention, so for customers who already purchased from you, which is a great thing, you can show them adverts for related products in order to try and cross or upsell them. So the first thing you need to think about is who your customer is, and then secondly, where they're at in that buying funnel.
How do we actually set up our retargeting audiences then to take advantage of this funnel strategy? So we need to think of our audiences as operating like a Venn diagram. So your first retargeting list would be purchases. So those would be basically everybody who purchased something on your website, and that could be your first retargeting list. So as mentioned on the previous slides, you could then show them adverts to try and sort of cross or upsell them. Your next audience would then be people who've added products to cart. So the way you would target this audience is to create that as a specific retargeting list. But when you actually come to set up your adverts, you'd want to make sure to exclude purchasers from that audience so that you're not targeting people who've purchased when you're showing adverts to people who've just added products to cart. Again, moving up the funnel then, you get to people who have viewed product pages or spent a given amount of time on site. And again, you'll want to make sure that you exclude those who added to cart, which will automatically exclude that bottom tier as well, the purchasers, because somebody couldn't have purchased something without first adding it to their cart. And then looking right at the top of the funnel then, you have all website visitors. So these are just everyone who's hit your website. And again, you want to exclude those people who went on to take more valuable steps like viewing more product pages, spending a given amount of time on site, etc. So hopefully you can see here the theory of how we split out our retargeting lists to enable us to show relevant adverts to relevant people at the right time in their journey. So bear this in mind when we actually come to setting up our retargeting audiences in Google Analytics, AdWords, and then within Facebook Ads Manager, because this is the principle which sits behind it.
So now we've looked at how to develop your strategy from a theoretical perspective. Let's get going with actually creating your first retargeting campaign.